Hello, everyone. Just a quick heads up. We've got some great bonus content available this month on What a Hell of a Way to Die. And if you sign up at the $5 tier, you get access to everything we have put out bonus content-wise since we started the show in 2016. The link is in the show notes. And otherwise, please enjoy this episode.
Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. He ain't gonna jump no more.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It is cold as balls where I'm at. Nate is probably also cold, but not as cold as me. So I win this round. I win this week, Nate, because it's going to be fucking negative. It's going to be in the belows, and Fahrenheit, not in your weird communist temperature measurements either.
It's the coldest that it's ever been since I've been here. Obviously, I've only been here 2.5 years, but it's in the 20s, and it's been snowing. Snow's actually stuck. We've had, today is clear, but for the past couple of days, it's been snowing off and on and actually sticking. So this is, in fact, the closest to a real winter that I have ever experienced in the United Kingdom. But yeah, it's not Midwest winter, believe me. Like, we talked about it last time, the phenomenon of it doesn't get above 0 Fahrenheit days. Like, I don't miss any of that shit. And I experienced that in Indiana and in Alaska and to some extent in New York, where it's not quite as cold, but it does get into the single digits and you've got wind, so I feel you. I've been online looking at warm countries, just Google Street viewing the fuck out of places that look nice, wishing I could vacation, but I'm stuck here. So
I love how you keep looking at like former British colonies as places to live. Like, next up, it's going to be like, oh, Australia. Well, what's next? Maybe we'll move to India. We'll see.
Yeah, I think the thing for me is more right now. Australia and New Zealand look particularly attractive because I follow enough people from those countries on both Twitter and Instagram that I'm seeing them posting like the normal shit they're doing in their lives. And for one, it's summer down there, but also because their COVID response was actually effective. They don't have, uncontrolled spread. They actually are like, you can go about your normal life there, particularly in New Zealand, but also in Australia. They did do a lockdown in Victoria, I believe. But people that I know who live in Victoria and Melbourne and outside of it, and then obviously people in Queensland or in New South Wales, they're fine from what I can see. I mean, obviously, like, there's all sorts of fuckery with the economy, and there's frightening, and I don't know how the government is handling the rollout of the vaccine and stuff like that, but in Britain, we have been in permanent lockdown since before Christmas. We still are in lockdown. I don't know when it's going to be eased. Obviously, it's cold. It's not as dark as it was, in December, but it's still fucking dark. And so, yeah, I think it's just natural to look at someplace. And yeah, I've always been kind of fascinated by Australia. I went there in the army and I really liked it, but was also kind of taken aback by some of Australia's downsides, the extremely long flight to get there, and then also the fact that people just, I don't necessarily know if they're more racist than anywhere else, that white people are the majority, but like, people will just say shit that Americans would just not say unless they were trying to provoke people, if that makes sense. Like, the stuff people just say, like, fucking out in the open, you'll be like, wait, what the? Yeah, it's wild. One of my soldiers, who was Dominican American, got called a darky on the streets in Rockhampton, but the woman who said it was saying it to him as a compliment. She literally came up to him and said, you're pretty good looking for a darky, ain't you? And like, he was just like, bitch, what the fuck is your problem? Like, was so shocked. You know what I mean? Like, that kind of stuff. And obviously, and invariably, it's the same kind of phenomenon that British people or Americans or Canadians will use when you have stories like that. They're like, oh, that doesn't happen where I am. It must be those rednecks or those bogans or whatever the Canadian word for people out in the countryside is. You know what I mean? But no, it's everywhere. And it's everywhere in America too. And, you can't really look at it and say, oh, well, my country is perfect and flawless. And it's like, yes, this invariably will be coming from someone in like Denmark. It's like, yes, my country is flawless. And by the way, we have a law to confiscate refugees' jewelry from them at the border. And we put them on this island off the coast of Denmark that's just like windy and inhospitable because we want them to know they're not welcome here. Like, don't even fucking get me started. So
yeah, it's always interesting to see, like, because I know American racism pretty well. Like, I'm very well versed in like the various racisms of America, and then like you read about France, and you're like, man, you guys are on like a different fucking playing level with your racism, aren't you? Like,
oh yeah, dude, holy
y'all
shit,
just hate everybody. Like, Like here in America, you don't even get into like the Roma. Like it takes a long time to learn that the word gypsy is a slur in America, because you're just like, oh, Cher sang that song, Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves. Gypsies, they do tarot card readings, and they have, very nice scarves and everything, and sometimes they, ooh, I'm looking to a crystal ball, and
yeah,
but then you
it's
go
all
to like
kind of
Greece.
like kitsch shit. But I mean,
Yeah,
there's a joke about that. I don't know if you've seen it before, because have you seen the political compass memes? With like authoritarian versus libertarian and left wing versus right wing and all that stuff.
Yeah.
There's one that I find really funny is basically Europeans talking about any political issue related, comparing themselves to America, and it's always like they're at the very far end of the like leftist libertarian side, and then Europeans, when they talk about Romani people, and it's like they've created a new Nazi swastika shaped extension of the right wing authoritarian side, and like they're at the absolute extreme of that. Like I mean, we have it in Britain here too. You have Romani, what they call travelers, Irish travelers, and like the extent to which, I mean, the Tories basically said they were in their manifesto for the election. They said that they were going to, which the word manifesto has a weird connotation in America, but in Britain, that's literally like the party's, like the platform, like what gets agreed at like the DNC and the RNC in America. Basically, it gets published publicly here before the election or during the election. But in their manifesto, they basically made it clear that they were going to criminalize travelers' entire way of life. And the level of anti-traveler rhetoric you hear getting kicked around in this country is absurd. I mean, like, it's genuinely, Britain is no different than the rest of Europe in the sense that, once you get people talking on that topic, you realize just how intense that and how it's like boomer quadruple forwarded email meme level of just deranged detachment from reality. And obviously, if you go to places where there are actually significant Roma populations or Romani populations, like in Central and Eastern Europe, yeah, man, it gets fucking wild.
Do you remember? I don't know if you remember this. The Irish Travelers TV show that Eddie Izzard was the main character of?
No, but I'm sure it was bad.
It was called The Riches. It ran from 2007 to 2008, and I remember watching it like the first couple of episodes. And they are Irish travelers, and it's just them. It's them doing cons, but it's not like. It wasn't funny. It wasn't super like dramatic. It was just this weird, like, I don't know what they were trying to do with the TV show, but I do know that it was kind of racist. But what it ends up turning is they end up stealing the identity of some like rich people in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and they struggle to adjust to their new lives and everything as they try to leave their their con artist traveler ways behind. It's a very like Trading Places kind of thing, except more racist, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wow, Eddie Izzard being involved in something unfunny. I for one could never have predicted this.
Do people not like Eddie Izzard?
To be honest with you, it's just any comedian of that stature in Britain invariably winds up opining about politics a lot. And anyone who was famous in the 90s or the 2000s invariably has not adjusted to the reality that the 90s are over. The long 90s, if you will, that started with the breakup of the Soviet Union and ended with the 2008 global financial crisis. And so invariably, like, in the context of the British left being more prominent, especially from 2015 to 2019, it's very rare to meet a comedian in Britain who was in any way popular before the financial crisis, who was, on TV level of popular, who isn't constantly showing their ass about hating the left, hating Corbyn, hating trans people, or just generally being a right-wing shithead. And if not being overtly like blood and soil right-wing, then just, I don't know, rehashing right-wing talking points and, sort of, oh, I'm just talking sense, but it's like, yeah, but you're not talking sense. You're basically saying the same shit Ben Shapiro says. It's one of those things where I'm always wary of that because I know Eddie Izzard was popular in Britain in the 90s and 2000s.
Certainly, any old white British person, my default is they're probably racist. They're probably if I'm around this person long enough, they're going to say something that's like truly offensive. But because I'm a straight white male, they think that they can say those things, and then
all the members of Monty Python who are still alive have basically become right wing. In the context of British politics, like basically, it's just really grim stuff, honestly. And I mean, I think about it with, the people that I've encountered. Invariably, I think they're really okay. Weirdly, the generation in Britain, obviously, I mean, boomers are right wing reactionaries everywhere in the world. Like that's just the default setting of if you grew up in the West and you're a boomer, then you had the largesse of the welfare state, and then they've chipped it away with every iteration where you no longer need the benefits it provided, and so you grew up with everything and or have convinced yourself that you fought in World War II. Like that's kind of default with British boomers and with boomers everywhere. But the thing that's really interesting for me here in Britain is that Gen Xers are extremely right-wing or extremely liberal, but not liberal like socially liberal, more like liberal in the sense of the real meaning of the word. Like, I believe in equality before the law, but also equality that basically rich people can do what they want and property is supreme. Like their politics doesn't go beyond capital L liberalism. And that has manifested. I mean, the traditional classical liberal party in the United Kingdom is the Tory party. So, I mean, watching Gen Xers in Britain who had this weird moment we've talked about this in Trash Future, like the rave culture thing in the 80s, and just sort of, I don't know how to describe it. Like they were the last real generation to cop a phrase from David Graeber. They were the last real generation who had the ability to sell out. If that makes sense, in the sense that like you could sell out and get a job and buy a house and become a landlord or whatever the fuck. Like now that's just, unless you have money, that's not really accessible to you. And so it's really weird because I mean, my read of Gen Xers in America is that they're not any more right wing. I mean, I think recent polling showed that Gen X was kind of like the generation that was the most pro-Trump overall, or in the last election. But I think that also has to do with the fact that if you're, 44 to 59 or whatever the fuck the qualifications are to be counted as a Gen Xer in America, and you're white particularly, that puts you in premium boat dealership territory. So it doesn't surprise me that like that's the case. But here in Britain, my God, the Gen X voices that you encounter are almost entirely either Tory or like center-right sort of liberal Democrat, which is a party name and it's not a thing in America. So I don't know. It's just been weird. You are not wrong to assume that if you encounter a British comedian of a certain age who is white, just assume they're going to be racist and a TERF until proven otherwise. And I mean, it was weird to me because two of my favorite authors are considered feminist British women authors. They are Penelope Lively and Pat Barker. And so far, I have not encountered either of them having said anything transphobic. And brother, do you have any idea how fucking rare that is? How unthinkable that is? So like, honestly, if either Pat Barker or Penelope Lively are TERFs, like tell me, I guess I should know. But I kind of don't want to know too, because it's just so weird. Like, granted, all I've done is look like Pat Barker trans people Google search or Penelope Lively trans people Google search. I haven't found anything. But normally in Britain, if they're going to be TERFs, you're going to know because they'll never shut the fuck up about it. So far, I have not encounteted it.
Nate, they're just asking questions about biology. There's
yeah, exactly. It's just basic elementary biology. It's just,
if you got a any, you're a girl. If you got a outie, you're a boy, right?
Exactly. And that's the way it always has worked. There's never been any deviation from this in all of human history. The only way that things have ever worked in all of human society is how it worked in the private girls' school I attended, and that's how society should be structured. Also, I should be head girl. Anyway.
I love Gen Xers because Gen Xers in the United States have the duality of like, I don't care. Yeah, we're the generation, we don't care. But also, you shouldn't get money because it's mine. we shouldn't raise taxes, but also I don't care. I'm going to listen to grunge music and have shitty politics all around you.
You know what's funny is so it really depends on how you tabulate being like the generational cutoff, because Cynthia could either be a very, very, very young Gen Xer or a very, very old millennial. I mean, in the sense that I don't know how you draw the line. I've seen the line drawn at 1980. I've seen it drawn at 1982. So that could,
either way, I'm an old millennial, but
yeah,
very, very near it. And my wife is the Gen Xer either way. So
yeah, it's the same thing for me. Technically, since Cynthia would be could be a Gen Xer, I absolutely am a millennial. My brother, who was born in 1982, could maybe be Gen X in the absolute most generous interpretation, but I'm not sure. He graduated from high school in 2000, and so to me it feels like you kind of can't be a Gen Xer if you graduated from high school after 1999, so he's right on the cutoff. You know what I mean? But like I said, I mean, he started high school in 1996, so, peak, like, not the peak grunge era in Seattle, but like peak grunge being sold as a commodity to the rest of America. Peak My So-Called Life reruns and, bands like Dishwalla being huge on the charts and stuff.
God bless those that middle class white boy 90s music.
Oh, dude, I was such a devotee of that stuff. Like, I have a weird backstory with music because my parents like alternated in waves of being cool about music and then really conservative about it. And so at one point, my parents had like Blondie records on vinyl and like Beatles and Jimmy Buffett, which, I mean, okay, Jimmy Buffett is commodity now, but I mean, some of Jimmy Buffett's early stuff was actually pretty decent. And then they sold it all and they only bought country music. So like, I know so much about early 90s country, like FM radio country music, even though I don't really like country music at all, besides like a few oddities here and there. But then I got my parents, I had this old boombox that I had gotten, like, 2 cassette decks and a radio tuner with like a long antenna. And I started listening to, alternative rock radio in, let's say, 1995. Like, I just kind of got, like, I heard the first Green Day album and like a year late, and I thought it was the best thing I'd ever heard. Or not even the first album, but Dookie. And I started listening to it all the time. And so I genuinely had this like 3-year period where I listened to alt rock radio so much. And I know way too much about the bands that were like big hits back in those days. And I wasn't sure if you were the same, like you were listening to music the same way, but I'm sure if you were in St. Louis, it's no different than what was on the radio in Indianapolis.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I grew up, my father listened to 99.1, which was the classical music station, and my mom listened to the oldie station, which, like, now you think about it, like, now the music that I grew up on is technically oldies because we were listening to, like, in the 90s, listening to stuff from the 60s. And it's like, well, I mean, yes, that's oldies, but now I'm old as shit. So,
but they have to like redefine it as oldies because everyone has associated oldies as just being boomer music. So now it can't be oldies, like stuff that's 30 years old.
Sorry to tell you this, but Screaming Trees is now oldies music.
I know,
it's
dude.
Okay.
Dude, I remember to give our younger listeners an idea of just how old we are. I remember when X103. No. I was living in New Mexico, so olden days. KTEG 107.9 The Edge in Albuquerque premiered a song for the first time, and it was Space Hogs in the Meantime. Like, I can remember when that premiered. I remember when they premiered the first time they played Soundgarden's Burden in My Hand, which fucking rules, by the way. That song is really good.
God, yes.
God, that song kicks so much ass.
All of Soundgarden.
Yeah, Soundgarden fucking, they were amazing. And you know what's crazy, too, is I feel like earlier Soundgarden doesn't really get, maybe it does now, but like back in those days, the only thing they ever played that wasn't super unknown or later was like here and there they would play My Rusty Cage, but not that much. But like, I remember someone linked me to a video of Soundgarden opening for Guns N' Roses in Paris, I think, in 1992. So this was way before Super Unknown. And they fucking whipped ass. They were so good. And I didn't recognize any of the songs because like, I'd never dug into it. And then, yeah, so back on the story of being old, I can recall when I was 16, there was 16 or 17, there was a thing on X103, what's it called? indie's new rock alternative. And
The X.
Yeah. It's something like that.
Mine was The Point, but there's also Kansas City, I think, was The Edge.
Yeah,
it's all the same guys.
Yeah, it's all the same guys. It's all the promos are done the same place. KTEG 107.9, The Edge, in Albuquerque. And so it was, X103.
By the way, I just sent you a playlist that I created last year of middle class 90s white boy music.
Oh hell yeah! Oh shit, dude, I love it.
The only rules for it is it had to be in the 90s. There is one 2000 song, and also one song per band. No duplicating the band. So I had to pick. I sent it to you. We'll put it in the show notes if you haven't seen it. There's like 70.
I know every single one of these songs. Of course,
I know you do. It wasn't hard to make this.
No, not at all. You know what makes me laugh is
I put jars of clay on there.
Hell yeah. I got to finish my story, but the point being is that to give you an idea of just how old we are, I genuinely think I was either I must have been a sophomore in high school, but maybe I was a junior. I can't remember. So I was either 16 or 17, but old enough to sort of have like a adult conception of the world, like sort of glancing at what the adult world would be like. And X103 had a show on Sunday mornings called Hangover Cafe, where they would play mostly newish, but definitely not hard rocking music. I mean, the obvious point being like it's post drinking hangover. We can't thump you out too hard with like rockin' beats and stuff. And they played they were premiering some new music. They did like a 3 new song debut, in a row, and it was Coldplay's Yellow. That was the first time that I'd ever heard. The first time they'd played it, I think. I remember them saying it was a premiere. And Easy Tonight by Five for Fighting. Like, those bands were entirely unknown, had never had hits before. So the idea of sort of the pre-Coldplay era, before you were even an adult, like, now they're a cliche and stuff, but genuinely no one had ever heard of them. Like, that first album, what was it, Parachutes? I think I remember seeing it at Borders, which, hilariously, buying CDs at Borders is now a foreign concept, too. But yeah, man, I mean, like, that whole... I know, maybe we're going to be reactionary boomers at some point. I mean, maybe there's going to be some issue that we just can't see eye to eye with the kids on. I don't know.
I have long ago made my peace on that. I'm not going to understand the 20-year-olds. Fucking David Hogg is going to start his own pillow company to compete with the My Pillow company thing. And it was like, at first I was like, this is dumb as shit. And I was like, well, he's 20, so of course it's dumb as shit. He's going to do dumb shit. He's 20. Let him go for it. He's smart and he's got resources, so fuck it. I don't get it, and I don't want to get it. I've got my thing going on. So
yeah, well, I just feel like I don't have to have a public opinion on everything, and if there's stuff that I did that I don't care about or that like I don't understand, I mean, if it's important, I feel like I might try to seek to understand it, but if I don't really care, or I just don't have to talk about it. And my goal is, I mean, who knows, maybe this is famous last words before eventually being canceled, but I'll be the first to admit that I didn't really understand very much about, for example, gender identity stuff when I was younger, but I've just tried to listen. And I think the biggest thing for me is, you pay attention to what trans people are saying and the conditions they're facing as far as getting healthcare and getting legal recognition and having equal rights and having, the ability to stand up to discrimination, to be legally protected from discrimination in things like employment and housing, and just like being able to live your life on the street and not worry about like being harassed by random people or harassed by the cops. Like, if you start on a long enough timeline paying attention and you see all these stories and you realize that all of the weight of all of this, experience being put forth by people who are just trying to live their lives in the world, and the only real opposition to it is just a bunch of weirdos saying, it makes me uncomfortable. This hypothetical situation makes me uncomfortable. It's like, what if you have any sense of fairness? And I feel like that gland in my brain is probably overdeveloped. Like, it's gonna, you know what side you've got to be on here. It's just be on the side of people who just want to be respected and treated fairly, as much as anyone else would be treated.
Right. In the libertarian / conservative world that conservatives tell me is so great and wonderful, like, you wouldn't care if a person is transgender. In fact, you would say, that's fine. You be who you want to be. That's your right to identify how you want and to be the person that you want. But for some reason, as soon as it comes, I think what it comes down to is like, they're just afraid that they're afraid that they're going to be gay. I think is really what it's just like somehow, some way a transgender person is going to make them gay.
Yeah, exactly. I will be made gay because all trans people have a gay laser that they can control. It's in outer space, but if you tolerate them long enough, like they'll put you in the sights of their gay space laser, and it's going to blast you and hit you, and then all of a sudden you're going to care a lot more about your personal appearance. Actually, that's kind of a stereotype because I am proud to know many gay people who are sloppy as fuck too. So you know what? That's a gross stereotype, and I rebuke my older self of literally 30 seconds ago for having said it.
Well, and let's also point out that at some point in time, the army was trying to create a bomb that they could drop on enemies, and instead of killing them, they would just suck and fuck each other until
yes.
Yeah, it was the gay. Look up the gay bomb, man.
Stop
Look up gay bomb.
making bombs that correspond to my darkest fantasies.
Could you imagine, like, the amount of times that munitions just end up going off just on their own? Like, you have one dud and it just releases the gay gas all over the artillery team. It's just like, all right.
I just love the idea of that happening and then be like, I actually want you to make that weapon so that I can just constantly live in a city that's deploying it 24/7. Like, I just put me in Gaytopia, right? Like, make it happen. So wait, what's the idea that like it would not just make you gay, but it would also make you horny? That was the idea of
exactly make you gay. I think it was just that you became so horny that you didn't care who you were fucking. So,
oh my.
That it would just bring out that latent id self.
Oh my god. Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is that you can never underestimate the depraved minds of, the sort of MK Ultra wing of weapons manufacturing and research, that if there's a thing, because I remember there being it's a fucking sad, just nightmare story, that one of the ways the U.S. government was considering trying to discredit, Saddam Hussein was to like manufacture a video of him sexually abusing a child and then, release this, as if this was going to be some scandal. And it's like, wait a minute, like what, were you guys going to just make child porn? Like, how the fuck were you going to do that? Like, were you just going to abuse some kid and have a guy wearing a fucking Saddam mask? Like, what, you realize like just how, maybe your goal, like in achieving your goal, you are willing to compromise your own basic humanity to such a great extent that it shouldn't be going down this road, which I realize is a lot less humorous than the idea of them making a gas attack that turned everyone gay. It sucks sometimes.
They also had a heavy sweating bomb, a fart bomb, and a halitosis bomb.
You gotta send me the links to this so I can put them in.
It's just a Wikipedia. The plan was to make an enemy so smelly that they could quite literally be sniffed out by hiding by their opponents. Now, I don't know where exactly in Sun Tzu's Art of War this is, but I know it's somewhere.
That's so incredible. Yeah, when you realize how much big business it is, doing munitions and research and shit like that, that is incredible. But Francis, we've been almost doing a half hour of Dad Chat, and I feel like we do want to bullshit trending in the direction of one story that is of interest to us, which is the whole phenomenon of white nationalists in the U.S. military, and particularly the right-wing freakout that has happened in the wake of the Secretary of Defense, retired General Lloyd Austin, asking for a safety stand-down day to try to assess in the entirety of the U.S. military how many white nationalists are among the ranks.
That's a good question, but I think personally, what's an extremist? The right certainly freaked out about Spencer Rapone and a Che shirt and a hat that said communism will win. And we know that he's a Nazi. Sure, he's got Nazi flags. That's an extremist. But what about the person like that major that watches Fox News constantly and is always talking about how who talks about how Obama was, the Antichrist or something like that. Somebody who is saying things that are not the first time you've heard them in the military. What do we do about that person? Because those people also went and stormed the Capitol on January 6th. So I mean, personally, I really feel like the military is not. It's not asking the right question. It's asking like how many extremists are there, but like I think the real question is how many potential extremists are there, and how do you cut that off? How do you get to the root of that problem rather than cutting off the dealing with the symptoms rather than the problem?
Yeah, the thought had crossed my mind that it would make sense to address more than looking at how many people do we. I mean, obviously, if you've got people doing overt neo-Nazi shit or extremist shit, slapping identity Evropa stickers all over stuff and things along those lines, which I know is a problem because I've heard it from folks who are currently active duty, and I've seen lots of reports, and a significant number of ex-military people seem to find themselves in these organizations. But the question that I have is okay, yes, go after that, find that out, but that seems like it's relatively low-hanging fruit. The real question I have is, how many people have had the experience of folks saying extremist flavored stuff? How many soldiers have heard their fellow soldiers or their NCOs or their officers say stuff, along the lines of helicopter rides or let's shoot all the Black Lives Matter protesters, or
let's nuke Iran.
Yeah, let's turn the Middle East into
let's nuke the Middle East.
Yeah,
all that shit.
When I've told the story on the show so many times, I won't rehash it in full detail, but just the level of like vitriol directed towards Occupy Wall Street protesters when I was in the Army, and the idea of like we should just kill them all, and it's just like, guys, these are American citizens protesting. Like, you can't jack your tiny dick about how you're defending the Constitution, and Americans owe you a debt of gratitude for your defense of their freedoms, and then be like, oh, by the way, we should also kill you for exercising those freedoms. Now, I realize that's, asking for that level of coherence is a tall order for right-wing extremists, or just right-wing brains in general. But that level of like that vitriol, that disgust, and that immediate snapping to like doing violence or fantasizing about violence, I think that's more common than people want to let on. And so to me, it's like, yeah, for sure, kick out all the fucking Nazis and neo-Nazis and weird identity freaks, who are going on about like we must reclaim our statue European heritage that never actually existed. But I also feel like there is so much of a disconnect between like the sort of professional service ideal and what people in the military actually say. And I mean, like, I'm interested in your perspective, Francis, because I'm telling you, man, especially when I was in S3 Air and I was working with nothing but senior NCOs in Alaska, which is like one of the widest duty stations you can be assigned at. Man, I heard so much wild shit about President Obama, or about black soldiers, or about non-white soldiers, or about Native Alaskans. The level of just what I would call anywhere from full-on white identity shit to just like intense chauvinism. I could tell a fucking story about one of my NCOs and like one of his friends who was a Marine reservist going on what I thought was like a relatively enlightened tirade about how we mistreated Iraqi civilians, but then turning it into a thing about like, get the N-word out of the White House, like in the drop, like a blink of the eye, drop of the hat level of just switching it up. I was just like, wow, for a minute I thought I'd met a Marine who actually had fucking empathy, and then whoops.
Whoops. They have that removed during boot camp.
So I'm interested in your experience if it's been the same boat, because my experience, just as an aside, is that I found the extremes were much broader in the reserve component when I worked with reservists, that you'd meet way cooler, more left-wing people who were in the reserves, and way more just like full-on death cult right-wing people as well.
There is... So being public affairs, you're not generally... like, you're around the combat people because, you do photos of them, you report on them, things like that. But, you're not really like a part of them. So they don't talk as openly around you as they feel to talk around each other. You definitely do pick some things up. I remember when I was at Fort Carson, Colorado. Fourth ID. I was out there for a week doing some DTMS training, which is it's basically how to make a training schedule on the internet. Your tax dollars at work, but out on the smoke deck where I didn't smoke, but I still hang out on the smoke deck because that's where all the cool stuff happens. And there would just be there's a couple of guys that. And this was like right after Trump was elected, and probably I think right after they dropped the first Moab ever, and we never really got to get anything out of it other than we did it, and there's some dead people, whatever. And you just hear this like, well, at least Trump's letting us take off the gloves. Maybe we can finally win this war. And like these are people who are younger than me, who have joined the army after me, who joined the army during war, which I didn't. So I was there before all of it, and it's just like I don't understand how you think in the year of our Lord 2017 at that point that you think anything is fucking winning here, man. Like, but it's no, we can finally go in and kill people. Obama didn't let us do this, and like I think about all the activists who talk about how much Obama like expanded the drone war, how he expanded the hunt for Al-Qaeda into other countries, how like it was 3 countries and now it's 7 countries. It's like, we've been killing the shit out of people. You're just upset that you don't get to do it. Like that's what you want here. And so you get this, this misconception that all of a sudden, oh, Trump's going to be the one that's going to allow us to do this, and then it always does. It's just like it devolves into somebody just like, man, fuck that. We should just hopefully he just lets us nuke the whole fucking place. Like I don't know how you guys haven't learned anything, but also the military and deployments and things like that don't exactly lean on trying to teach you a fucking thing. And again, you have to realize we're all here for a class on how to do training schedules on the internet. Like this is not some kind of, combat thing where we're all getting shook up and it's like, all right, we're gonna go do some fucking army stuff. Like it was taught by a civilian. It started at 9:00 in the morning. It ended about 3:30, and we had an hour and a half for lunch. It was like literally one of the easiest classes I've ever done, and I hardly used any of the information that we learned in it because it's making a training schedule on the internet. It's not that fucking hard. But it's just fucking ingrained. It's ingrained to like a bunch of soldiers are sitting around, they're talking, they're bullshitting. What's the first thing we're gonna do? We're all gonna check out each other's combat patches. We're gonna talk about where we've been and what we've done. But like it's when you're me, when at the time still budding leftist politics and still trying to figure out exactly who I am and what how I feel. And then you just get like, oh, people have been saying this shit around me for years, and it just didn't register as this is a bad way to think about stuff. You get that like we shouldn't be killing people for this because this is a dumb reason to kill anybody.
Yeah, and that thought had crossed my mind that those attitudes have such crossover with right-wing extremism, or what I might also call a sort of like libertarian extremism, which is, I don't know, it's pretty almost indistinguishable from right-wing, except it's more like the right-wing extremists are sort of the Deus Vult, conquer the lands and convert them to Christianity shit, like Ann Coulter said, probably as part of her act to sell books, but lots of people believe it. Whereas the sort of libertarian variety of this is like, those people are all mud races. They're not worth our blood and treasure. Let's leave them to their own devices. It's the same sort of thing. But those sort of twin poles of extremist thought, like very chauvinist dismissal of all these, other countries and cultures and the situations, the circumstances that have led to these situations. I feel like that is adjacent to extremist thought. And that's the thing for me, is that I don't expect the military to do much to eliminate that as much as, okay, yeah, the obvious targets being the people who have just been through the Trump era, just pushing the limits of being overtly racist. Because, I mean, I don't know, man, like the Oath Keeper shit was all over when I was in the Army, because a lot of fucking crazy white people lost their minds when Obama won. And, when that disinformation machine starts making these people think that, Obama's going to eat your babies and turn them gay with a space laser, like it starts to breed a lot of really, really deranged reactions. And oath keeperism was one manifestation of it. And I feel like that's still there, and it's probably worse now. I mean, the shit that I saw some of my former soldiers, who I'm friends with on Facebook, sharing when Trump won or when Trump got inaugurated, like, it made me realize that, yeah, those attitudes never really went away. And I do think that, like, yeah, if you're like that Marine, I think, or Army soldier who had fought with the Azov battalion in Ukraine and then enlisted, like, you're gonna get kicked out. That's probably gonna happen. But a lot of the sort of, call it soft right-wing extremism or right-wing extremist adjacent thought, not only is that not going to, there's no way people who partake in that are going to get kicked out. I don't even really think there's going to be much of an effort to engage with it and to counter it, because I think that, I mean, if the reaction to even this stand down from the right-wing elements of, veteran and military talking heads is any indication, they already think this is Pol Pot communism, like, This is socialism, but also Nazism, because Nazis had socialist in their name. You know what I mean? Like, they are freaking the fuck out about this very obvious, open goal for the military to be able to be like, look, we did this training. Now we've countered extremism. So if that's the state of the discourse surrounding this stuff, man, yeah, I don't really have any high hopes for it.
It's, the thing that I at least kind of think of is that it was worse when I joined, and it's slightly better now. And it's getting better, slowly but surely. More people are willing to speak up, more women soldiers, and more people who have experienced, trauma or, need therapy or things like that. There is kind of a veneer, that the tough guy veneer of the military is being dropped, much to the hatred and chagrin of people like Jesse Kelly, who spent 4 years as a mortarman in the Marines and now never shuts the fuck up about how the military is being pussified because they're like, hey, maybe we shouldn't have Nazis in the ranks. Everybody has this just like, oh, they're looking for white supremacists. That must mean it's going to be really hard to be a white person in the military. It's like, if you're just not a white supremacist, you'll be fine. It's real easy, and I hate to say if you've done nothing wrong, then you have nothing to worry about. But really, when it comes to white supremacy in the military, if you're not a white supremacist, you don't really have to worry about it. This isn't, I feel like people are doing the same thing after the concerns of like when sharp training started, when they're like, oh, but what if a woman falsely accuses you, then your entire career is going to be ruined. And like, that's happened twice since Sharp was started years ago, and neither the soldiers who were falsely accused had their careers ruined. Like, it's just not a thing that fucking happens. So you get a lot of these old heads who are no longer in the military, who were in the military during like a time when it was great to be a straight white male because you're on top of the heap. You got the promotions. You got the best.
You could go to Korea and do sex tourism, and literally it was encouraged. Yeah. Like, yeah. It's just hearing some of the stories from folks that I knew, like one of my fellow officers in Korea was a prior enlisted guy. He promoted to captain while I was already a captain, but he had gone all the way up to like E6 or E7, I think, before becoming an officer. So he was a junior soldier in Korea in like 2000, like pre 9/11 and pre the Yangju Highway incident, which led to a whole. I mean, that we could do a whole episode on that. And we probably should someday, because like, it completely changed the U.S. military's relationship in Korea because of just basically people being dumb and deciding to drive a defective vehicle that couldn't communicate. The TC and the driver couldn't communicate, and then they ran over two middle school age girls who were walking to a birthday party, and then basically didn't do anything about it, like didn't announce anything, like didn't really do any effort to sort of mitigate the damage, and then it led to like basically a general strike in the country. But these guys who had been in Korea back in those days, man, I mean, some of the stories you'd fucking hear from them, like, it was just absolute sex trafficking, sex tourism. Like, one of my friends was like, yeah, man, even our chaplain was in on it level of just wild fuckery. And I'm not saying that's good. I think that is unequivocally bad. Absolutely bad. And I'm glad it's gone. But you can understand why people for whom that was normal and encouraged think that, the fucking Olympus has fallen because of the fact that the army is like, actually, we shouldn't encourage our soldiers to do sex trafficking. You know what I mean? Like, it's wild to me. But yeah, I do think that old head access is, correction. I do think that old head axis of whiners online and whiners who are still in the military is still really crucial there, like you said, Francis, because they get really upset that things aren't the way they used to be. It's like, yes, there used to be a beer vending machine in the barracks. There isn't anymore. Fucking get over it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the old people, I mean, that's how it always is, right? The old people get out and then they complain that, you know, it's too easy now. It was harder back when I was in the military, and like that's true, and it's good that it's easier now. Like when, yeah, I've been reading a book about like, you know, kids that were laborers in the 1800s, 1900s who go on strike and, you know, fought for better wages, but you know, like even the wages, even what they were striking for were still like massively horrible. You know, working 12 to 16-hour days, 6 to 7 days a week for, you know, $1 or $2 a day. You know, it's still like absolutely insane. And you know, like then you get to 2021, and my kid is complaining that the macaroni and cheese that I made isn't the right macaroni and cheese, and it's just like, you know, like you want to do that, just like, I just want to put you in this situation so you know how like hard it used to be, but also there's a reason why we're not like that anymore, because it fucking sucked.
Yeah,
and we didn't want kids to go through that, and it's good that we don't have kids to go through that. And, you know, you can have those conversations with the child and be like, look, I'm sorry I didn't make the blue box mac and cheese. I'll, you know, fucking scrape off. I made like a baked macaroni and cheese. She didn't like the breadcrumbs on top of it. Fine, cool. We can move around that. And regardless of what you think about my parenting skills, one way or the other, I don't think it's going to be a good idea to be like, well, let's show you how shitty it could have been for you.
Yeah,
if it was,
like shaming them
like,
for that.
I'm gonna cut your leg off because I want you to know what it's like to have had polio or something. Like, no, we don't do that anymore. And it's, you know, it's the same thing with the military. And it's always old white dudes who are just mad that the world is changing. And it's not so much that the world is changing and leaving them behind, is that the world is becoming, you know, in some way, slightly more equitable. And the anger comes in just like being mad that equality isn't bringing you down, it's bringing everybody else up. And then suddenly you're surrounded by people who you didn't recognize, and you're just like, what the fuck? Why are things different? Why are things like this? Why aren't we doing, you know, why aren't you forcing that soldier with the sprained ankle to do a 12-mile ruck march? Because we know that that's fucking stupid. That's stupid, and you're going to break a soldier. You're going to break that person for the rest of their life over some toughness thing. It's not worth it. It's not worth it for them. And, you know, it's just like you hear, all you ever hear are the good stories is like this, you know, this person's injured, they're wounded, and they kept fighting, or they kept playing football or whatever. Like, playing through the pain is seen as this, like, you know, tough, manly thing. As like, that's great and all until like you break your knee and you're dead forever. Like, your knee is just fucked for the rest of your life.
Like I toughed it out with a sprained ankle in Ranger School, and my ankle is still fucked to this day. I mean, obviously I was grateful to be able to get some physical therapy, and that has helped it to the point where like I can do most normal things with no problem. But some days, man, I wake up and my right ankle just is not flexible at all, and I have a hard time walking until it warms up. So I absolutely understand. But the one thing I would leave this with before we go into the bonus preview is the summarized version is, I remember being in a situation in Afghanistan where we went to the chow hall on Fob Rushmore, and that night there were a ton of interpreters who were on the base, and so the line to the chow hall was long. And watching this Georgia National Guard lieutenant lose his mind at the fact that he had to wait in line behind Afghans really kind of hammered it home to me that like
I've seen that.
The anger, the fury that this guy he was losing his fucking mind, basically saying, I'm not going to wait behind these people. Like, is that if you don't see them as equals, then the idea that someone has the right to like be ahead of you in the line for dinner, if that makes you that fucking mad, how are you going to react when that person, you know, is in charge of you, or like, you know, has a spot in a school that you want for your kid? You know, you realize that mentality, and that was like a really illuminating experience for me, like seeing that person lose their mind when I was just like, dude, it's a fucking line. It's going to take 10 minutes, whatever. Like, you wouldn't be losing your mind if it was a bunch of your fucking massively out of regs Georgia National Guard fellows, you know, with the other fob. But because they're Afghans, you don't think they're people. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, there's a hierarchy and a pecking order, and it's like, man, we're in their place. It's not the other way around.
Yeah.
You know?
Fucking hell, man. But anyway, you did a bonus that was really cool where you talked to an Antifa medic. So maybe give a little preview of that.
Yeah, I talked to a guy, Scotty Blue. He reached out to me. He said that he was a medic in the Army, a 68 Whiskey, and after he got out of the Army, he kind of transferred into being a medic on the civilian side and helping out at the Portland protests. So we talked about the protests at the height of the height of everything. What to do if you're going to be at a protest? What to do if you think that you might want to be a medic? And how to kind of take care of yourself at these situations. So here's that. So how many times have you been tear gassed so far?
I can't even count at this point. There was a point where it was every night for at least 2 months.
So what, I guess, kind of give us some an idea of like the ebb and flow of a night of protesting from the eyes of a medic.
Okay, so at least when we were down at the courthouse, and things have kind of changed, but the more things change, the more they stay the same. So at least when we were dealing with the feds down at the courthouse, and they put up this fence, so like people would show up when it started getting dark, and the crowd would get bigger, and we'd have like big like a rally on one side of the street where there'd be like there'd be people giving speeches and everything. And then slowly but surely a small group would trickle away and they'd go over to the fence at the courthouse and they'd start shaking the fence or like putting flags up on it and burning it or throwing shit over it. And then everyone else who was listening to the speeches was like, oh, that's more interesting. And they would migrate over here. And pretty soon either the fence is getting torn down with either by hand or by grappling hook at one point. And then whenever the feds or whoever at wherever we're at, whenever they got bored or disinterested of watching people do crime, they would come out and just do crime themselves and just tear gas the ever loving fuck out of downtown Portland and shoot hundreds and hundreds of pepper balls and impact rounds, and then they'd chase us. Some nights they'd chase us like 2 blocks. Some nights they'd chase 12. And then they'd go back and we'd go back and do it again.
So is this how long does this go on for? Like when do you hit that critical mass and everybody's just like, it's 2 a.m, guys. Let's just go home. We'll meet back up tomorrow.
Yep, that's about the time, like 2 or 3. Usually it was after like the second time the police came out, so it was kind of time dependent, but anywhere between like 1 and 3 a.m. probably, unless it was a special occasion. Some of those nights they went on and on and on and on.
So what's your role? I mean, you're not I assume one of the people who are shaking the fence. Do you and the other medics try to just maintain like a kind of like the legal observer thing where it's just like, look, I'm just going to stand back here, and if if shit happens, I'm going to go in and take action, but I'm not technically, like, I don't want to say you're not part of the protest because obviously you're there to support the protesters, but do you try to keep yourself as I guess seen as a neutral third party?
Yeah, with like ebb and flow of that. So we would all meet up in our groups of medics, and we would like set roles like, oh, I feel more comfortable in the front towards the fuck shit, or I'm going to wait in the back and help with evac or whatever. And then it would kind of be dependent. I know like my friend, Chris, he's like my best friend. He's like my partner out there, basically. He likes to joke with the cops. So he would just relentlessly throw insults at them every time. And they're all really dumb and really funny, and everyone loved him because of it. And that was like his thing. And then I just kind of was like, oh, that's cool. And so that's how I wound up with him. And so like we would get close. We'd get close. We kind of got a reputation with PPB for shitty jokes. And then some people will, put on a medic cross, and then they'll just, throw back tear gas canisters. And I'm like, kind of making the rest of us look a little shitty for the cameras, but whatever. I'm just going to look away.
It's technically a war crime what you're doing. You can't put on a medic cross and then like start hucking rocks at the cops and be like, I can't believe the cops would, do crimes against this. You're literally doing a crime.
Yeah, exactly.
Like not even just the chucking a brick at a cop. Like I don't care about that, but wearing a red cross while you do it, that's crossing.
Yeah,
the line,
exactly.
guys. Don't
If you're gonna
don't do anything.
if you're gonna fucking do fuck shit, I'm cool with it, but just wear black bloc, bro. Like, come on,
Yeah,
be like everybody else.
Don't hide behind the medic badge. So what are I guess if things go down, like what are the common things that you have to treat?
So it kind of depends on who they're protesting. So if we were at like the federal courthouse or ICE, which has been a real hot spot lately, it's always tear gas, mace, and pepper balls. So a lot of eye washes, a lot of just ice packs. It's pretty simple because the feds they go in hard and fast, and then that's it. When we were dealing with like Portland police, they like the bull rush, so they pushed people down and into buildings all the time. I had broken arms and broken legs. And another weird thing about downtown Portland, because the protests, when they were centered right in the middle of downtown, we would just wander upon random medical incidents that had nothing to do with what was going on. So one night I was hanging with Chris at the intersection above the courthouse, and someone came over and they're like, there's a guy on the sidewalk over here, and like, I think he's sleeping, but you should go check. So we jogged over there, and the dude was having a massive overdose. His pulse was almost non-existent. His respirations were like in the 60s, or his pulse was in the 60s. His respirations were like 5 a minute. It was so fucking bad. So it was a good thing someone told us that, but that's what you have to deal with in downtown Portland, or downtown of any city, but especially with the environment of an active protest. It's really weird.
Yeah, it really feels like we could benefit from just like every city just having roving teams of medics just wandering around. So somebody like, because you never want to like call the cops, because who knows, like especially in more disadvantaged neighborhoods, because the cops are just going to come in and break stuff and be generally unhelpful.
Yeah.
But if you could just be like, hey man, somebody I think is having an overdose, or somebody over here got shot. Could you get them somewhere without having to make this a whole thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah.
And they're trying to build that in Portland right now, just through like connecting hundreds of people in like signal chats. But they're trying to build that network of like mutual aid, like on the ground medics. The only problem is you deal with like people who don't have certs, and you deal with people who have certs but no license, and then you deal with people who actually have licenses to practice. It's kind of a mess. But and you'll have random like stabbings, or like you'll have those protests where like the far right shows up and they shoot guns in the air, or someone tries to run people over. We had the Trump cruise one night where Michael Raynal shot this guy named Jay, who was a Trump supporter, and that was a whole fucking nightmare.
So I guess tear gas is the thing you treat the most there, right?
It used to be. Now it's mace, because Portland police stopped using tear gas. The feds still tear gas, but usually it's mace. It's mace and pepper balls.
What's the difference between the mace and the tear gas?
Mace is usually individually targeted, or on New Year's they had this giant spray gun of mace. It was huge. It was crazy, but mace sucks way worse than tear gas. It takes forever to get off, and you can't really stop the burning for like the first 15 minutes, no matter how many wipes you use on someone or how much saline you dump into their eyes. Mace is almost impossible to stop burning. You just kind of have to get it off. You can actually relieve tear gas.
That makes sense. So tear gas is the you wash it out and then you're fine. You can move on. But mace kind of, I know I've always heard that mace really sticks to your clothes.
Oh yeah.
Too.
Like one night, I think it was August 22nd. They had like this QAnon rally in front of the police headquarters, and so of course Antifa shows up, and there was a huge fight. And I've never seen so much mace in my life, and I didn't even realize I got sprayed until like I got home and I took my shirt off, and I was like, oh, I got mace on me, but I didn't burn. And then I like got in the shower, and it felt like someone lit my fucking arm on fire.
Oh really? So you get. So it was on your arm. It didn't hit you in the face, though.
No, thankfully I had a gas mask on.
Yeah. So where'd you get a gas? You said that they gave you the helmets. Where'd you get the gas mask from?
Yeah, so my gear went from a bicycle helmet and a backpack to an ACH, a fucking level 4 plates, all that good stuff, gas mask, and basically it was acquired through just like random people that I met. And people were like, "Hey, do you need a gas mask?" And I was like, "Sure." And at first I had a half face, and then I got a full face. And then someone was like, "Oh, we're donating plates. Do you want plates?" So I got a bulletproof vest. And then my friend Chris was like, "I got this new helmet. My friend Dan gave me his ACH that he disappeared from Afghanistan. Do you want it?" And I was like, "Hell yeah."
All right. So everybody, as always, thank you for listening. You can follow me at Army Strang, follow Nate at In These Deserts, follow the podcast at Hell of a Way. We have YouTube videos on the YouTube. If you're not necessarily listening to this episode on YouTube, I do weekly videos on there, as well as, the bonus, as you just heard, the Patreon, patreon.com/hellofaway. That's where all of our, our once a week bonus stuff is there, but we will always have some free shit for the rest of you. And as always, thank you for all of your support in whatever way that you can give it to us. So until next week, Nate, we'll talk to you later.
Zoom, zoom.